Jenny and Mark were high school sweethearts. Their relationship was one of those picture-perfect romances that seemed to exist only in movies. Mark was the popular kid, the football team's star quarterback, while Jenny was the quiet girl who preferred reading in the library. They balanced each other, and soon their relationship became the talk of the school. One summer evening, they sat by the lake under the dim glow of the setting sun. Mark held Jenny's hand tightly as they talked about their future. "I want us to have everything," he said, eyes glowing with excitement. "A house, kids, the whole dream." Jenny smiled. "You really see us together for that long?" "Of course," he whispered, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "You're my forever, Jenny." Months passed, and everything seemed perfect until Jenny missed her period. A trip to the clinic confirmed her suspicion. She was pregnant. The news hit her like a whirlwind, and fear clouded her mind. Would Mark be ready? Would he support her? Or would he see this as the end of their carefree love story? That night, she invited him over to her small apartment. As soon as Mark entered, he knew something was off. Jenny's usual smile was gone, replaced by a nervous tension. "Jenny, what's going on?" he asked, sitting down on the couch next to her. She took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. "I'm pregnant, Mark." Silence filled the room. Mark blinked, processing the weight of her words. "Are you sure?" "Yes," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Mark stood up, pacing the room. He ran his hands through his hair, frustration building inside him. "This can't be happening," he muttered under his breath. Jenny's heart sank. This wasn't the reaction she had hoped for. "We're too young for this," he said, looking at her with a mix of fear and anger. "How are we going to raise a child? We have no money, no plans." Jenny bit her lip, trying to hold back tears. I thought we'd figure it out together." Mark shook his head. "You don't get it, Jenny. My life, our lives, they're over if we do this." And with that, the cracks in their perfect romance began to show. The days after Jenny revealed her pregnancy were filled with tension. Mark became distant, avoiding her calls and texts. Jenny felt abandoned, but she tried to stay hopeful, believing that Mark just needed time to process the situation. A week later, Mark finally agreed to meet her at a small diner. He sat across from her, fidgeting with the silverware, avoiding eye contact. Jenny's heart raced. She needed to know where he stood. "Mark, we need to talk about this," Jenny began softly, her hands folded on the table. "I know it's scary, but we can make it work. Together." Mark sighed heavily, his face a storm of conflicting emotions. "Jenny, I've thought about it, and I can't do this." Her stomach churned, but she kept her voice steady. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said, his voice hardening, "I can't be a father right now. I can't throw away my future because of a mistake." Jenny's eyes filled with tears. "A mistake? This is our baby, Mark." He leaned forward, his frustration bubbling to the surface. "Look, I never asked for this. You want to keep the baby, fine, but don't expect me to stay. I'm not ready for any of this." Jenny's world crumbled at that moment. She couldn't believe the boy she had loved so deeply was walking away from their child. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but she refused to beg. "So, that's it. You're just going to leave?" Mark crossed his arms, his face cold and unrecognizable. "It's your choice to keep it, Jenny. But if you do, you're on your own." She stared at him in disbelief, her voice trembling with emotion. "You're really saying this to me?" Mark looked away, guilt flickering briefly in his eyes. But then, with a finality that crushed Jenny's heart, he muttered, "Yeah, I am." Jenny sat there in stunned silence as Mark got up from the table and walked out, leaving her alone in the diner, her hand resting protectively over her stomach. Weeks later, Jenny went to her first ultrasound appointment, her heart heavy but determined. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to face it. The doctor smiled warmly as the screen flickered to life, revealing the tiny, fluttering heartbeat of her baby. "Everything looks good," the doctor said reassuringly. But then she paused. "There's just one thing. I noticed a slight abnormality. We'll need to run more tests to confirm, but it could indicate a developmental issue." Jenny's breath hitched. She had already lost Mark. Was the universe about to deal her another blow? But she refused to give up. No matter what, she would love this baby with everything she had. She left the clinic, clutching the ultrasound photo tightly. Life had taken a sharp, painful turn, but Jenny knew one thing for sure. She would never abandon her child the way Mark had abandoned them both. Months passed, and Jenny's belly grew along with her determination. Despite Mark's abandonment and the uncertainty surrounding the baby's health, she pushed forward. She attended her doctor's appointments alone, read parenting books, and even started preparing a small nursery in the corner of her one-bedroom apartment. Her parents, though initially shocked by the news, slowly came around. They offered emotional support, though they lived too far away to help with day-to-day needs. Jenny, however, was resolved to handle things herself. One rainy afternoon, while folding tiny baby clothes, Jenny's phone buzzed with a message. It was from Mark. She stared at his name on the screen, her heart racing, unsure of what he wanted after months of silence. "Can we talk?" Jenny's hand trembled as she replied. "About what?" The response came quickly. "I've been thinking about everything. I just want to talk, that's all." Jenny hesitated. Part of her wanted to tell him to stay away, but another part longed for closure. Or perhaps, deep down, she hoped he'd come to his senses. They met the next day at the same diner where everything had fallen apart. Mark looked different, tired, worn down. His confident demeanor was gone, replaced with uncertainty. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, barely meeting her eyes. Jenny took a deep breath, trying to keep her emotions in check. "Sorry for what?" "For how I reacted," Mark muttered, fidgeting with the napkin on the table. "I was scared. I still am." "Scared?" Jenny repeated, her voice tinged with frustration. "You think I'm not scared too? I'm the one carrying this baby, Mark. I've been scared every day since you left." Mark winced, clearly uncomfortable. You know, but I can't help how I feel. I'm just not ready for any of this." Jenny stared at him, her anger slowly simmering. "What did you expect? That I'd change my mind and get rid of our baby just because you're not ready?" "No, Mark's voice trailed off. He rubbed the back of his neck, searching for the right words. "I thought maybe we could work something out. I don't want to completely disappear from your life." Jenny's heart clenched at his words. "Disappear? You already did, Mark. You left me when I needed you the most. Now you want to come back and work something out? What does that even mean?" He sighed, his shoulders slumping. "I don't know. I just don't want to lose everything, okay?" Jenny shook her head, standing up from the table. "You already made your choice. You walked away. Now I'm doing this on my own. You can either be a part of it or not, but I'm not waiting around for you to decide." Without another word, Jenny walked out of the diner, leaving Mark sitting there, conflicted and unsure of what to do next. As the months wore on, Jenny became more and more focused on preparing for the baby's arrival. However, she couldn't shake the anxiety over the potential complications the doctor had mentioned. Each night, she lay awake, worrying about her baby's future, wondering what challenges awaited them both. Then, one fateful day, Jenny received the call she had been dreading. The results from the latest test had come back. The doctor's voice was calm but serious. "Jenny, your baby has a condition that will affect his mobility. It's called spina bifida." Jenny felt the weight of the world pressing down on her. Her hands gripped the phone tightly as she listened to the doctor explain the diagnosis. It was a life-changing moment, one that would shape the future of both her and her child. But as overwhelming as it was, Jenny's love for her baby only grew stronger. She knew that no matter what, she would be there for him every step of the way. The day finally arrived. After hours of labor, Jenny heard the first cries of her baby boy. The moment she held him in her arms, every fear, every doubt melted away. His name was Ethan, and despite his small frame and fragile legs, he was perfect in her eyes. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "I've got you, Ethan. I'll always have you." The nurses were gentle, explaining that Ethan would need ongoing medical care and therapy. Jenny listened carefully, absorbing every piece of advice. It was a lot to take in, but she was determined to do whatever it took. The first few weeks were exhausting. Ethan's condition required frequent hospital visits, and Jenny spent many sleepless nights soothing his cries. But every time she looked into his bright blue eyes, she knew it was all worth it. Meanwhile, Mark was nowhere to be found. Not a message, not a call, nothing. Jenny told herself that she had expected this, but the truth was, it still hurt. The boy she had loved had disappeared from her life, leaving her to carry the weight of it all. Yet, Jenny found strength she never knew she had. She learned how to advocate for Ethan's needs, found support in parent groups, and built a little community around them. Years passed, and Ethan grew into a cheerful, curious child. Though he used a wheelchair and needed assistance with some activities, his spirit was bright and unbroken. He loved superheroes, dinosaurs, and drawing pictures for his mom. One day, as Jenny watched Ethan sketch a picture of the two of them standing side by side, she felt a swell of pride. They had come so far. Her son had become her whole world, and though the journey had been hard, she couldn't imagine life without him. But despite all the progress, there were moments when loneliness crept in. Jenny would catch herself wondering about Mark. Did he ever think of Ethan? Did he ever regret walking away? She shook off those thoughts, knowing they didn't matter. She and Ethan had built a life together, a good one. And then one fateful afternoon the phone rang. Jenny answered, expecting another appointment reminder or insurance call. Instead, she heard a familiar voice that made her heart stop. "Jenny, it's Mark." Her grip tightened around the phone. "What do you want, Mark?" There was a long pause on the other end. "Hey, I'm at the hospital." Jenny's pulse quickened. "Why? What's going on?" "It's not me," Mark said, his voice shaky. "It's Ethan. I saw his name on the patient list. I didn't know it was him until now." "Jenny, what's wrong with our son?" Jenny's heart dropped. She had brought Ethan to the hospital for a routine checkup earlier that day. How had Mark crossed paths with his son after all these years? Jenny's hand trembled as she processed Mark's words. After all these years, he had finally seen Ethan. Part of her wanted to hang up, but another part knew that this moment had been inevitable. "He's here for a checkup," Jenny said coldly. "Nothing you need to worry about." Mark's voice cracked. "Jenny, please. I need to see him. I need to talk to you both." Jenny exhaled sharply. "After everything you said after you walked out, now you think you can just show up? Do you even understand what you did to us?" There was silence on the line. When Mark finally spoke, his voice was heavy with regret. "I know I can't undo what I did, Jenny. I was a coward, but seeing him today, it hit me. I didn't just walk away from you. I abandoned my own son." Jenny gripped the phone tighter. A part of her wanted to believe him, but she had spent too many sleepless nights alone to let her guard down so easily. "Where are you now?" she asked reluctantly. "I'm still at the hospital," Mark said. "In the lobby." "Please, Jenny. Let me meet him. Just once." After a long pause, Jenny closed her eyes and made the decision. "All right. We're in room 312. When Mark entered the room, he stopped in his tracks, his breath catching in his throat. There, sitting on the hospital bed, was Ethan. The little boy looked up from his coloring book and gave Mark a curious glance, his bright eyes full of life. Ethan tilted his head, sensing the tension. "Mom, who's that?" Jenny knelt beside her son, brushing a hand through his messy hair. "Ethan, this is Mark, your dad." The boy stared at Mark for a moment, then gave a small shrug, as if meeting an absent parent was no different from meeting a stranger on the street. "Hi," Ethan said simply before going back to his drawing. Mark's chest tightened. He had missed so much: Ethan's first words, his first steps in therapy, every milestone. And now, faced with the reality of his son, he felt the crushing weight of regret. Jenny crossed her arms. "You wanted to meet him. Now you have." Mark took a hesitant step forward. "Ethan." His voice faltered. "I know I wasn't here before, but I want to be now." Ethan looked up again, his expression curious but cautious. "Why weren't you here before?" Mark's throat constricted. "I was scared," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But that's not a good excuse. I made a mistake and I'm sorry." Ethan blinked, processing the words in his own childlike way. "It's okay," he said with a small smile. "Mom says we all make mistakes." Tears welled in Mark's eyes, and he had to look away, ashamed of how much he had missed. But Ethan's simple forgiveness pierced him more deeply than any accusation ever could. Jenny, standing by the window, watched the scene unfold with guarded emotions. She had dreamed of this moment, Mark finally realizing what he had thrown away, but now that it was happening, it felt bittersweet. "Being his father means more than just showing up now," Jenny said quietly. "You missed years of his life, Mark. If you want to be a part of it now, you better be sure. Because Ethan deserves better than someone who's here today and gone tomorrow." Mark nodded, wiping his eyes. "No. I won't disappear again, Jenny. I swear." Jenny gave him a long, searching look. "We'll see." In the weeks that followed, Mark kept his word. He showed up, at first cautiously, then with growing confidence. He attended Ethan's therapy sessions, learned how to help with his daily needs, and took the time to get to know his son. At first, Ethan was indifferent to Mark's presence. For him, Mark wasn't dad in the traditional sense, just someone new trying to fit into a life that had already been built without him. But slowly, their bond began to grow. Mark discovered Ethan's love for superheroes, and soon they were spending afternoons drawing comic book characters together. Jenny remained wary, observing Mark's efforts from a distance. She wasn't ready to trust him fully, but seeing Ethan smile more often made her heart soften. One day, as they left the hospital after another routine checkup, Ethan tugged at Jenny's sleeve. "Mom, can Dad come with us for ice cream?" Jenny glanced at Mark, who was standing a few feet away, looking unsure if he was welcome. She knelt down beside Ethan. "Is that what you want?" Ethan nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah. He's not so bad." Jenny chuckled softly and looked up at Mark. "Well, you heard the boss. Ice cream." Mark's face lit up with a smile. "I'd love that." At the ice cream shop, Ethan sat between his parents, happily digging into his chocolate sundae. Jenny watched them interact and felt an unfamiliar but welcome sense of peace. As Ethan ran off to explore the brightly colored wall art, Mark turned to Jenny. "Thank you," he said quietly. Jenny gave him a small smile. "For what?" "For giving me another chance. I know I don't deserve it." Jenny's gaze softened. "You're right, you don't. But this isn't about you or me. It's about Ethan. If you're here for him, that's all that matters." Mark nodded, his expression filled with both gratitude and determination. "I won't let him down again." Jenny leaned back, finally allowing herself to relax, if only for a moment. They weren't perfect, and the road ahead was still uncertain. But for the first time in a long time, there was hope. As they walked home that evening, Ethan holding both their hands, Jenny couldn't help but feel a small flicker of something she hadn't felt in years. Contentment. Maybe, just maybe, they could build something new from the broken pieces of the past.